G'day everyone and welcome to the Brett Lee podcast. I'm your host Brett Lee. As always, want to chat about the Ashes. Want to wrap it up. It's all done and dusted. Australia 4-0. England not even on the board. Buzzard. Brad McNamara is here with me, of course, my partner in crime. Firstly, the Ashes. I mean, the Aussies, they cleaned it up in 3 days. I mean, give me a break.
G'day, Binger. G'day, everyone out there. Yeah, it was a very meek and mild surrender by the England team in the end. Pretty much bowled out in an hour and a half. At one stage, they got none for 68. Looked like they could have pulled off a victory, but just the lack of fight and surrender was awful. And you'd have to say it was probably a fairly indicative scoreline. Actually, I think it probably flattered England. I think it should have been 5-0.
Well, I actually reckon that England, they had their moments throughout those 5 tests where they could have won at least 2 of the matches, and I reckon they could have won. They could have chased down that 250 on the last day.
Yeah, well, throughout the series,
last test.
Yeah, throughout the series, they'd have a good hour here and there, but then could just never keep the pressure on or back it up. And that was a great example, that last innings. They had a good hour, none for 68. The opening partnership, the best one of the series so far, and then they just crumbled in an absolute heap. It was just almost a mercy killing in the end. Yeah,
they just got absolutely hammered. All right, favourite moment of the Ashes?
I'd have to go with Scott Boland on debut, Boxing Day test, taking 6 for 7, and those scenes as Mark Howard, how he built him a statue at the MCG, the way Bay 13 was going off, and his reaction, he was almost embarrassed by it, but hard to go past that one for me.
Yeah, well, for me it was winning the toss for Pat Cummins for the first time at the Gabba. Seems like it was like 3 or 4 months ago. Ball in hand, Mitchell Starc, everyone had written him off. I backed him, comes steaming in, leg peg, gone. First ball of the first Ashes test, Mitchell Starc gets a wicket. To me, that's my favourite moment.
They'll go hard, hard to beat that. I mean, we've had some interesting first balls up in Brisbane over the years. Steve Harmison, bowled one to second slip first ball, but nothing to compare with that. That was unbelievable. Just set the tone for an amazing series. What about some notable exceptions? Any others that? I mean, they're our 2 favourites, but there's
couple of runner-ups.
Yeah, you get a run.
Probably Joe Root getting hit in the nuts.
Which time? Well,
the poor bug. He's such a good player.
I reckon. Joe getting hit in the pills was everyone laughs when bats would get hit in the nuts. But I reckon even funnier was him trying to run to the ball after. It looked like he just jumped off his horse after 7 days in the saddle.
It was so. Do you have one? That was so funny.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to go back. It was a funny series. I think probably Usman Khawaja's 200s at the SCG was an amazing story. Hard to go past that as well.
Yeah, I mean, he played brilliantly, didn't he? 200s in his comeback game, so well done to him. All right, we're going to take you now to the moment that the Aussies won the Ashes.
Australia win in Hobart, they win the 5th test, and more importantly, they win this Ashes series 4-0.
That's a big win by Australia. Not the best shot by Ollie Robinson. Pat Cummins, a new skipper. Have a look at him, right in the middle of that happy bunch.
Yeah, what a moment when the Aussies won the Ashes. They retained the Ashes buzz. It's such a great moment for when you're playing in this format of the game to win against the English. Just makes you feel so special.
Yeah, fitting Pat Cummins took the last wicket as well to tie the series up 4-0. Amazing series for him. He's first as captain. All the doubts beforehand. Would he, wouldn't he? How would he handle it? Did it on his ear, really.
All right, Buzz, what we love doing is dipping into our WhatsApp questions, and it's a big pool. We've got a lot of questions come through. We apologise that we haven't been able to get to every single question. We'll try throughout the next few episodes, but we've got one here. Hey, Binger and Buzz, we've got a question about the numbers on the back of your playing shirts. Now, this person has often wondered if the players get to pick. Do you get to pick your own number? I'm number 58, and do you have any good player stories? Thanks, Dan. All right, Dan. So, Buzz, what was your playing number?
Well, my number was number 12, but I was, I think, FAI Cup or maybe Mercantile Mutual Cup was the first time we actually had numbers on our jerseys in domestic one-day cricket. And it basically, they just went through the team. Captain was number 1, and then in your batting order, I think I was 12th man in that game for New South Wales. So I was stuck with number 12, no say in the matter.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. We sort of had a bit of an inkling as to, well, not an inkling, we had a bit of a say, I should say, as to what we could pick. Now, I my favourite number is 8, and I couldn't pick number 8 because Brennan Julian had number 8. And my second favourite number is number 5.
Could you trade a number with someone?
Well, you couldn't. I mean, you don't know if Brennan Julian was going to make a comeback and, keep playing one-day cricket. So 5 was taken by Steve Waugh, so I combined 5 and 8, which is 58. So that's how I got my number.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I don't know how they do it these days, whether they get a choice or... I guess you've got to be careful. You can't get into triple figures, otherwise it won't fit on the shirt. But
well, they do in other formats of the game. In Indian Premier League, you got Chris Gale, who's even in one day cricket, he's 333 for his, I think, his highest Test score.
Yeah. What are any unusual numbers that you know of stories that guys have chosen a number that is out there?
Well, the guy we just mentioned, Joe Root, has got number 66. Root 66.
I like it. Sure, I thought he might have gone 68 and I'll owe you one.
That could be the funniest thing you've ever said.
No, it's not that funny.
Welcome back to the Brett Lee Podcast, segment 2, Buzz. This is a very special one for us, but we have a guest on today that I reckon will be our number 1 seed. Do you know who it is?
Yeah, he's had a tough week to follow, but I think you might be right.
All right. I'm going to read out some stats before we introduce who it is. Now, we've been interviewing a lot of cricketers, but it's refreshing today to have someone very different on. And I reckon, Buzz, if these were cricket stats, Piers Morgan would average close to 99.94. Born the 30th of March, 1965.
Good year.
And very good year. How's this? So he's worked from 89 to current. The Sun, editor of News of the World, editor of the Daily Mirror. First News, he replaced Larry King on CNN. Good Morning Britain. He's got over 10 million followers on social media, a lover of sport, in particular football and cricket. Piers Morgan, my number 1 question right off the top, how are your ribs?
They are still pretty cooked, I have to say, after, as you know, you destroyed them in a net in front of millions of people. No, my ribs send their very best, and I've tried to keep them many thousands of miles away from you ever since that fateful day, and that's how I intend to keep it.
You keeping well there, mate?
Very good. I mean, I didn't think anything would be more painful than breaking those ribs in that net, but funny enough, getting out of bed at this hour for you two, for your podcast, is right up there, particularly given we've just been absolutely shellacked in the Ashes. There's nothing better than losing that badly and then having to talk to Australians. So thank you.
Well, mate, we'll get to the ribs in a second. We want to talk through that in more detail. But, yeah, mention the Ashes. Could that possibly be the worst England cricket team to tour Australia, in your opinion?
I don't think it's the worst cricket team. I mean, ironically, you could say there's probably 4 players in that team that might get into an all-time great England 11. Joe Root, Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, Ben Stokes. So it's not a terrible team. What it was, without any question, was the most underprepared team that we've ever taken to an Ashes series. And I think that's been a complete tragedy for cricket fans here, to watch a team that literally are barely bowled or batted before they got to play what is a very good Australian team. I don't think it's a great Australian team yet, certainly not a team to match the ones perhaps of the late 90s, early 2000s, but certainly a very good side, very pumped up side, one that had a lot of cricket before they got to us. And I'm afraid, you can't cheat in sport, can you? You can't. I mean, you can cheat in sport, as you guys know, but you.
I can say you take 2 minutes.
Yeah, that wouldn't be far away.
Short of any sandpaper, you can't cheat in sport. And what I mean by that is, if you have no preparation for a series of this magnitude, then you're going to get steamrolled, and that's exactly what happened. I sort of think wistfully now, what would have happened if Jofra Archer had been fully fit, for example. We saw how well Mark Wood bowled. To have the two of them in tandem would have been pretty exciting, I think, in Australia. If Ben Stokes had been fully match fit, which clearly he wasn't, if we'd had a few proper hard practice games before we got to the first test, if we'd made some better decisions, I would have bowled first in the first test. I would have played Stuart Broad, wouldn't have dropped Leach at Adelaide, and so on and so on. You can go back over the whole series and say we should have done this, that, and the other. But if you ask me what is the underlying problem, I don't think it's we didn't have good cricketers, because, like I say, 4 of them would be all-time greats. It's we did not have enough preparation, and that actually goes to the inherent problem with English cricket, which is we're brilliant at the limited over game now, but the longer form of the game, the red ball cricket, has almost disappeared in this country. It's been shoved to the margins. We now play it in the worst conditions in spring and autumn on terrible wickets. The players get no chance to really build long innings, and this is what happens if you go purely for the lower over cricket, and you abandon proper preparation for Test cricket, you're going to get hammered. And that's what happened. It's very sad. We've got to make some serious changes.
Piers, who will become accountable for this tour?
Well, I think Chris Silverwood, the coach, will have to go because he's been so vocal about we're going to come with the most prepared team ever, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, we were a complete disaster. I would actually keep Joe Root as captain if he wants to continue. I don't think he's the problem. I think the problem is the top order batsmen clearly have had a disastrous series. But that, again, goes, I think, to the reality of our county system. I think Australia's state system is way ahead of us. There's no question. You just get better competitive cricket to plan for these series than we do these days. I was thinking the other day about the difference. When I used to be a kid, I used to live near the Sussex Ground on the south coast of England. And I used to go with my brother, who's now an army colonel. Brett. We had dinner after you mangled my ribs, and he's a lovely chap.
He's a good man. Loves a drink.
He's a very good man, and he thoroughly enjoyed you doing that to me, by the way. Actually, no, it was the other brother, wasn't it? It was my younger brother we had dinner with. But my other one's an army colonel. And we used to go and watch all the Sussex games, and for about 5-6 years. And every team that Sussex played, bear in mind, we had at the time Imran Khan and Garth LaRue, two of the quickest bowlers to play in county cricket history. But every team we played had a world-class fast bowler. If you played Surrey, Sylvester Clarke, you played Somerset, Joel Garner, you played Hampshire, Malcolm Marshall, you played Middlesex, Wayne Daniel. You could go through. Richard Hadley was playing in county cricket. You go through any of the big teams. They all had world-class fast bowlers. So the English batsmen were playing day in, day out, week in, week out against the very best fast bowlers in the world. Now you won't find any bowlers of that calibre playing in county cricket. So our batsmen, the sort of training academy for Test cricket, is almost non-existent. They're facing 80-mile-an-hour dibbly-dobblers who capitalise on tricky wickets and get bundles of wickets as a result. But it's no preparation for facing Cummins and Stark on a quick one at Melbourne. To me, the whole system has to change. So I think Silverwood will have to go. Ashley Giles may well have to go because I think there'll be accountability for people running the show. And it's a shame. He's a very nice guy. I would actually stick with Root if he wants to continue. I think Root and Stokes are about as good as we've got. So I don't know who else you give the captaincy to, frankly.
Stokes, maybe?
Maybe, if he wants it. I'm not even sure that Stokes wants to do it. It's a bit of a hospital pass right now. I do think that Root is still a little bit inexperienced in decision-making, but he remains our best batsman. And I don't know really what it would make much difference if he went to anybody else. So, sometimes if you've got an obvious replacement, but we don't. So I think if Root wants to continue, then continue. But my God, we've got to change stuff because the idea of meeting any more smug Australians in the next few months with faces smuggler than you two right now is just too dreadful to contemplate.
Well, Piers, we will get into your ribs shortly and that whole incident, which was one. Look, I've got to say, I've watched Ashes cricket and in my job as working in broadcasting and cricket, I think the two things that stand out for me most in my times watching Ashes cricket is being in Binger's ear while he was bowling at you that day in Melbourne in 2013 in the nets. And I'll never forget morning one in 2015 at Nottingham when we got rolled for 64. The atmosphere was unbelievable. But, mate, you know your cricket. You love your cricket. Last time I saw you, in fact, we were at John Paul Getty's ground in London for Beefy Botham's fundraising.
Well, I'm very glad you mentioned that because
tell us.
You may remember what happened that afternoon.
Well, what happened? Tell us.
Well, let me tell you, mate. You're going to sound like a wanker if you say it. Let me say it.
Right. What happened, Buzz?
You say it, then I'll sound like a wanker. It's fine.
Okay. You got down on one knee and caressed the great Pigeon McGrath who covers for four. Don't save your legs. No need to run.
Really?
And then knocked him over first pill.
Have some of that.
So that,
it's actually slightly worse than that if you're Glenn McGrath because I got him out first ball first. So he came out strutting, cocky, 5,000 people, commentary team, the world's great players, Viv Richards, Beefy Boat, everyone was there to watch this. And I have no fear. Ever since they got Brian Lara out for Norton, and I hope we come to that, I have no fear against the world's greatest players. And I certainly had no fear against one of the worst number 11s in cricket history. So he came out, giving it the big one. I came in, I'd been bowling some offies, flipped him the leggy. He didn't know what was happening, ponked forward, ball hit the top of his bat, came back at me. I leapt like a gazelle, caught it inches off the ground. And I gave him the Usain Bolt send-off. And there's a great picture of him just hanging his head. Hogarth's at first slip. He's hanging. Not even my own team wanted this to happen. And anyway, so I sent him off. Off he went. And then Andrew Strauss was my captain. And he put me in number 3 because he said McGrath wanted revenge and he wanted to watch it happen. So I go in number 3, past Strauss, who's just chuckling as he says, "Good luck, mate. Pitch is going off the long run." I turn around and McGrath's gone back to the boundary. The crowd are revved up. Everyone's pumped. And I'm just sitting there thinking, unlike our batsmen in Australia at the moment, I was thinking one thing: attack and humiliate. And McGrath came steaming in off his full run, gave it the full throttle. It was probably 95 miles an hour, probably the quickest ball he's ever bowled. Yeah. And I came down the track as I tried to do to you, actually.
You charged him.
And I gave him a couple of goes down the track and just crunched him literally on bended knee through the covers like a firecracker. It went so hard, he didn't even know what had happened before it smashed into the boundary ropes. And fortunately, it was caught on video. And I've been playing it pretty well on a loop ever since. Yeah. He took it really well, as you can imagine.
Did you get anyone else out that particular day?
Not that day, but if you want to move swiftly to Brian Lara, I'd be very happy to tell you about that.
Yes, that was my little segue.
I don't think getting Glenn McGrath out for naught is particularly anything to sing about in cricket.
Not really.
Well, Steve Hall did say he should have been a left-handed batsman.
That's true.
When he asked how could I improve my batting.
The Brian Lara one was funny because it was in St Kitts during the Caribbean Premier League, and it was a charity game. Ian Botham, again, is involved in this. I was captaining his side against Brian Lara's team. And he got the biggest crowd of any Caribbean Premier League game, even though it was just the charity 2020. And there's a video the whole day, fortunately, on YouTube. And you watch me get on the coach in the morning. And Lara gets on, and I sit there, and you just hear me immediately start chirping at it. And I'm like, "Brian, how you feeling?" He went, "I'm fine." Why? I said, "I'm just thinking, mate, imagine when you walk out to bat, and I come on to bowl, and everybody wants me to get runs. And I'm just twirling my little dibbly-dobblers and something goes horribly wrong. Just imagine that." So it's in his head. So we get there, and it turns out we bat first. We bowl first. And Lara comes out, I think it was over 14. Now imagine the scene. They got 100-odd. In comes the great Brian Charles Lara. The crowd are going nuts. And there's 12,000. It's packed, completely packed. Absolutely going nuts. And I go and meet Brian halfway. And I put my arm around him and walk him to the crease. And I said, "Brian, look around this ground. They've all come to watch you bat from all over the West Indies. All of them. Nobody wants to know me or cares. But I'm going to get you for naught and ruin everyone's day." He just told me a few words I won't repeat on your podcast.
Well, you can, anyway, doesn't matter.
He goes in. What he didn't know was that we were a bit short of players. So we got 4 local lads, very lithe, supple, fit young men. And I'd said to all of them in the dressing room, anyone who catches Brian Lara off my bowling gets $250 cash. I wasn't taking any chances with a little one that got dropped for the team, for the crowd. So Lara comes in, I come on the bowl, and I bowl 6 of the worst off breaks you've ever seen in your life, but they happen to all land in a reasonable area. And he treats all of them like a hand grenade. And in between each one, I'm giving him plenty of verbal. So now the tension is building because he's now bowled out a maiden over to me in the 15th over of the 2020 in front of 12,000 screaming people. And at the end of the next over, he's still down my end. He hasn't moved, still on naught. So I went down and said, "Brian, no offence, mate, but it's not a test match. This lot have come to watch you get
on with it, Brian.
Hop in.
Not block me out like Alistair Cook for the next 3 days." So he laughed, gave me more abuse. And then I tossed one up, a little bit more flight. Just moved in the air, a little bit of a warning, sort of drifted into a bit like the Gatting ball, actually, but with a right hand, an off-break version of the Gatting ball. A bit of drift, a bit of fizz, popped away. Lara comes charging down the track, tries to smash me into Barbados, and he whacks it through mid-wicket like an Exocet missile. about 2 inches off the ground. And one of my 4 young guys leaps fantastically and swoops this ball an inch off the ground. And there's just like a terrible silence. Apart from I'd forgotten I was mic'd up, and all you could hear was me screaming at the top of my voice, yes!
Did he get the $250?
Absolutely. So I then led him off the pitch. As you can imagine, it was a slightly more miserable journey for him than the 1 hour. And then it got actually significantly worse. You wouldn't think it could, but when we batted, I came into bat with 3 overs to go. Third ball, I smack it up to mid-on, high in the air, and get dropped by Brian Lara off Roger Harper, who was not happy. And then in the last over, we want 10 to win. Brian brings himself on to bowl to get redemption. And I smack him for a straight 6 and snicker 4 through the slips. Job done. Walked off. I'm made man of the match. Brian Lara thinks his entire cricket world is now going to rest on this moment. And he was with Miss Scotland at the time, I think, romantically entangled with Miss Scotland. And I said to him, how do you think your day could possibly get any worse than this? He went, well, I suppose you could run off with my girlfriend. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was with Darren Gough and a few other people in the bar, and Brian's girlfriend, a very nice lady at the time, Miss Scotland. And I said to her, Nick, when I shout Brian's name, just lean over and just nuzzle my neck, will you? So she said, sure. So I said, hey, Brian. He looks over and he's nuzzling my neck, and he said, yeah, his day just got worse.
Just got worse.
So for many reasons, it was one of my favourite moments in cricket.
Well, mate, I'm actually catching up with Brian as well in a couple of days, so I will mention that story, mate.
Look, he loves talking about it.
He's a great guy, Brian Charles Lara, and could play the game, of course. Now, look, mate, you've been surrounded.
I want to ask you actually, on that, is he the best you ever bowled at, Lara?
Good question. Yes, him and Sachin Tendulkar. And I try to explain the reason why. Like, when you bowled a Sachin Tendulkar, you could bowl 6 balls on the top of off stump, and you could get driven down the ground 6 times, from the off stump at the bowlers, where the stumps are, right around to sort of cover. You know that if you bowl an off stump, you get driven in that V. Brian Lara, on the other hand, you could bowl 6 balls on his off stump and get hit through point, taken down the ground, worked across, down to fine leg, hit through cow corner, hit through extra cover. He's just a freak of nature. So 2 different batsmen to bowl that, but 2 different results. But yeah,
funny enough, I found Brian Lara just hit all 6 of mine straight back to me, and then hit the 7th straight into someone's hand.
But Binger didn't sledge him.
Maybe exactly.
Technical advice.
I had no chirp to Brian Lara, so that's probably where I went wrong. Could have.
I saw him in Barbados in that famous game. Was it '99 when he won it with Courtney Walsh and Curtly Ambrose at the Kensington Oval in Barbados against? I think was probably you were playing, weren't you? I think Brett, were you in that game?
Yeah, I was in early 2000. It was. I think I was over there 2001 maybe. I didn't go to 99.
It was the one when he hit 150 on the last day in Barbados. I know Warren was playing. I think.
I think there was a trip before me. Yeah,
you weren't in that game. But it was one of the greatest innings I have ever watched, and it was exactly what you said. The England players told me when he got the world record against them that every time you moved a fielder, he would deliberately hit the next ball exactly where you'd move the fielder from, just to play with you.
He would just take the piss.
That to me is genius.
Yeah, he's an absolute.
And he's a lovely guy, isn't he? He's a really nice guy.
He's a great guy to work with, mate. Hey, I was going to ask you because it intrigues me. Like you've been surrounded by royalty, music royalty, movie stars, presidents, prime ministers, sporting stars. Do you ever pinch yourself and think, "How the bloody hell did I get here?"
Yeah, regularly. Yeah, no, I feel very lucky actually. I'd like to be quite cocky on Twitter, as you probably gathered, and sort of make out this is all just.
Yeah, but you wind people up beautifully.
Of course. And in fact, it was winding up the England players in 2013 that led to my ribs being broken. So it's not always a very smart tactic. But no, I feel incredibly lucky. I got out some pictures the other day for my daughter. Actually, she's only 10, and my boys are all old, and you met them. And they, my daughter never really realised what I'd done as a newspaper editor or whatever. I was showing her some of the pictures with the Queen, Princess Diana, Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, Professor Stephen Hawking. I've met 4 American presidents. I've met 7 British prime ministers, and so on. And all my sporting heroes, which probably to me mean more than anything. To me, especially cricket heroes, because cricket's my great passion in sport. To have been able to meet really all the heroes I've had in the game is an incredible blessing. And I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to do that. And yeah, you do pinch yourself, you know. I mean, I had a moment actually when Bob Willis died last year, incredibly sadly, and he was obviously a great English cricket legend. But just several years before he died, it was around Beefy's 60th again, actually, and he had a golf thing for a few of us down in Sunningdale in England, and we went to the Waterside Inn, beautiful restaurant afterwards, 3 Michelin star restaurant, and it was me, Bob, Beefy, a couple of others. We got riotously drunk on fine wine, brilliant conversation, and we ended up in this little hut outside on the river. And it was a sunny day, the sun was twinkling, the water was rippling, and we had large brandies and big fat Monte Cristo cigars.
Yes.
And the two of them sat in the hut and spent 2 hours talking me through the 81 Ashes, which is a series I'd much rather discuss than the current one with you two. But I remember saying I think I spoke to my brother and my mum afterwards. I went, you know what? That was probably the greatest 2 hours of my life. Because when I was 16, that was the 81 Ashes. And it was that series that really catapulted me from big cricket playing, loving fan to super fan, where we all wanted to be both of them. We all wanted to have Bob Willis's, will to win. To have those guys sitting in a hut in the middle by a river after a long lunch, talking me through that series was one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Wow.
Piers, in 1994, at 28 years of age, you become the youngest national news editor, News of the World. News of the World, it was originally established as a broadsheet by a fellow called John Brown Bell, who identified crime, sensation and vice as the themes that would sell most copies. What could possibly go wrong? Take us. That's probably why, through those years, I was over there playing cricket in England through most summers. The first things I'd do every day would buy The Sun, because I was quite a fan of the Page 3 and The Sun.
I think you enjoyed Page 3,
and News of the World. But take us back, for a young bloke who started a career as a newspaperman, what was that like?
Oh, it was completely surreal. I began on The Sun, actually, because I was the editor of the Bizarre Showbiz column. And that was a great job. I used to fly around the world. In those days, the papers had so much money. You'd fly first class around the world, stay in the best hotels. And my job was to go to pop concerts and interview huge celebrities. It was about as good as life gets. And then Rupert Murdoch flew me to Miami when I was 27, I think. And he flew me to Miami, walked me along Miami Beach for a few hours, and then had lengthy conversation with me. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know why he'd flown me out there. And I'd only met him once. And at the end of it all, there was a guy called Dave Hill. I'm sure you gentlemen know Dave Hill, great Hilly, a television legend. And he was there at a party that night. Rupert had just bought the rights to the NFL football in America for Fox. And that night they had a party to launch it. And I'll never forget it. Rupert introduced me to Dave Hill. After this whole day, I had breakfast with him, walked on the beach with him for several hours, all this kind of stuff. Did not know what I was doing there. And he introduced me to Dave Hill as, this is my friend Piers from London, Dave. He's the new editor of the News of the World, which was then the biggest selling newspaper in the world. And I was like, what? Because I couldn't say that. I just pretended like this would make perfect sense, that I would be this age with my experience, which was very limited, and was now editing his biggest ever paper. So it was a fantastic ride. I did it for 2 years, broke a load of stories, had a lot of fun, and then got poached by the rival Daily Mirror, which was the rival to Rupert's son. And I then competed against him for 10 years, which was an amazing experience. And I had a fantastic time. And then I having become the youngest newspaper editor for 50 years in Britain, I then became the youngest to be fired as well at 38. So that was that. So
Piers, as a newspaperman, does the ink run in the blood? I know we all know and love you now and see you mostly on TV, but what do you consider yourself as?
I know. I was put on immigration forms or whatever. I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist. Journalist and a broadcaster maybe, but underpinning everything I've ever done. And I was very disappointed in my CV that you read out at the start. You neglected to mention my years judging piano-playing pigs on Britain and America.
I'm getting there. That's coming up. That's coming up because I actually got some good questions for that.
It was because I was very proud of that work. But it was I think I'm a journalist. I always wanted to be a journalist when I was a kid, 6 or 7. My mum used to remember me avidly reading the papers, and I just loved the smell of papers, the feel of them. I still do. I still get 6 papers every day, even though the sort of print versions are slowly going out of fashion. I love that feeling. I love news. I'm addicted to news. One of the reasons I love things like Twitter is it's constantly giving me new information. And I think that I just love that. I've always had a sort of addiction to wanting to be the first to know stuff. And I think that it's lived with me throughout my career. And whatever I've done in my career, whether it's the morning show here or the new show I've got coming or CNN replacing Larry King or even Celebrity Apprentice, which we may get to when I competed in that with Donald Trump as the host.
And you won
all of it came back to my skills as a journalist, really, which I developed as a young guy working on the Sun and then local papers before that.
Before we get to quickly what you've done in your TV career, like I want to ask you just in regards to the papers and stuff. Like, you know, you're obviously a guy that isn't afraid of speaking his own mind, and I appreciate and I like that about you. Is there anything in hindsight where you wish you didn't do, or you could have done something differently? Anything that?
Well, I think the only things I ever regret are when I've got things wrong. I just think the unforgivable crime for a journalist is to get a fact wrong. And I've been on the other side of the fence now for many years where I've had stuff written about me. So I know that the most galling thing, you know, you guys have been in the papers over the years. When you've done something, if you played a really bad game and you know you played a bad game and you get hammered for it, you may not like getting hammered for it, but you kind of understand and you have a cringing respect for the fact a journalist has called you out for playing badly. When you've had a good game and some spotty little geek journalist hammers you anyway because he doesn't know what he's talking about, that is incredibly irritating. Similarly, if you've, off the field, if a sportsman does something, I've talked to Warney and Beefy and these guys who had as many stories about their off-the-field exploits as on it. It's the stuff that was just untrue that really annoyed them, not the stuff necessarily that was true. They just felt that was, irritating, but at least it was true. And I think that's been my yardstick as a journalist. It's the stuff you get wrong that you later in life just regret. I just think facts should be facts, especially in this new fake news world we exist in. Nothing is more important than the truth. And, I did 3,500 newspapers as an editor in 12 years. And I got a few things wrong. They tend to be massively amplified in your career because they blow up and they're huge and you wish that hadn't happened. But I probably don't regret the things that other people imagine I might regret. I don't regret, for example, when I left the Daily Mirror, it was over very controversial photographs of British troops apparently abusing Iraqi civilians. And I don't regret that because I believe those things did happen and that the story we published was true. Never really got to the bottom of what the pictures were, but we certainly believed them to be genuine. But I don't regret it because I later met, through my brother, the chief of the British Army, who said to me that we were right to publish it and that, in fact, there had been bad apples in the British Army doing bad things out there, and it was unforgivable, unacceptable. So it's not the big stuff that people may think I regret that I regret. I can remember little stories that were wrong and caused damage to people that if I had my time again, I would not want to publish because I now know they're not true.
Were there times where you had a massive story and you had to cover things up or you just couldn't print it or you had to...
I had a time, you know what, I was thinking you might ask me that. I had a time when I was walking to the pub down in Canary Wharf in East London and we had a story on page 7. It wasn't even on page 1. And it was about Paul McCartney, who had a new girlfriend called Heather Mills at the time. And it was the first proper relationship he'd had since Linda had died, his wife. And everyone knew that was one of the great marriages. Been about a year and a half since she died. They'd actually met, Paul and Heather, at a Daily Mirror Pride of Britain Awards, which is our big event where we get celebrities to present awards to ordinary members of the public who've done amazing things. And Paul sat next to me at that lunch. And there's a video of him tapping me and saying, "Who's that?" And it's Heather Mills. And they get introduced and they fall in love and so on. And it was quite early in their relationship. And the story was they'd had a huge argument in a restaurant. Pretty basic tabloid fodder. Beatle Paul in row with Heather. They'd been shouting at each other, or she'd been shouting at him, I think. And a waiter had tipped us the wink from some restaurant. I didn't really give it any thought. And then I was walking to the pub and my mobile phone went. And it was Paul McCartney. And it was a Beatle on the phone. And he was just saying to me, Piers, he said, "Piers, I'm just ringing you because I know you got this story. And the story is completely true. And I'm just asking you whether you could possibly do me a favour. I'm at a very early stage of a new relationship. It's the first one since Linda. It's not been very easy because of all the limelight it's been attracting. I know you're a Beatle fan. I know you introduced us, and I'm just asking you for a favour. If you could just do me a favour on this one, I'd really appreciate it. Because if every time we have an argument, it becomes news in the papers, I don't think we're going to be able to survive as a couple. And I want to try and make it work. And I just thought, well, this is one of those moments, are you going to be human to this guy who's lost his wife, several years before? Are you going to be human to him and do him that favour? Or are you going to be the tough guy, hard news, tabloid editor saying, no, I don't care who you are. You're going to get it. And I pulled the story. And some people in the newsroom agreed with me when I told them why, and some were furious. But I felt then, and I felt now, it was the right thing to do. You've got to have some humanity even in the shark-filled world of tabloid papers. Because if you don't, I think it shows through the paper to the readers. The readers aren't inhuman. They don't want you to be unnecessarily unkind to people. And they would have probably, most of them agreed with me to do that. But he did say to me, if you do this, you can come on the plane to one of my next gigs. And that never actually happened. So Paul, if you're listening,
at least
if you're listening, Paul, I'm still available. But I never regretted doing that. I thought I did that a few times with people when it was that kind of circumstance. And in a way, you're playing God to a certain degree, and it's an awesome power and responsibility that you have to hold very carefully, because sometimes you will publish stuff which does cause a lot of aggravation for people, and perhaps it was unnecessary or untrue or whatever.
Piers, how hard is it to have an opinion these days? In the days of these days of cancel culture and politically correct police, which, by the way, drive me nuts.
Yeah.
How hard is it to have an opinion these days? The world's a very different place from when you began your career in journalism.
Well, I can't stand this woke nonsense with the cancel culture, where you either sign up to this very narrow worldview of life, or you have to be shamed, abused, cancelled, and so on. I think it's completely ridiculous. I wrote a book about it last year in Britain, and it sold 300,000 copies because it really hit a nerve with people. And it's not because I'm a right-winger. I'm not actually even probably by normal yardstick conservative. I'm more liberal than I am conservative, but I think liberals have gone nuts around the world. They're not liberals at all anymore. Liberal used to mean you'd listen to other people's opinions and respect them and debate them. Nowadays, they don't allow. This woke brigade just don't allow debate. They don't allow a democratic conversation. They don't have the ability to argue and then go and have a pint with people they don't agree with. They just want to kill them, exterminate them, just trash their careers, have them removed from whatever it is that they're doing. You see people being driven out of their jobs all over the world. It's crazy. And they've become, in a way, the very fascists that they claim to hate so much. If you talk to them, they say, we're trying to drive out fascism. Yet they behave like fascists. And I think that fascism is about trying to make the whole country or the world conform to your worldview. And I think it's very dangerous. And I think we've got to get back to democracy and what democracy means. And democracy means you have to listen to other people who have different opinions to yours, and you have to respect that. Some of my best friends have very different opinions to me. I like that. I don't want to have just friends that agree with me.
No, it's healthy, yeah.
And also, they want to suck the joy out of life, don't they, these people? I had a great conversation with an Australian woman who stopped me in the street after the Meghan Markle debacle, as I call it, when I had to leave the morning show for disbelieving someone who tells lies all the time. And I was stopped by this woman in the street, and she said, "Mr. Morgan, I'm an 80-year-old Australian woman, but don't hold either of those things against me." And I laughed, and she said, "I'm right behind you on this Markle nonsense and these wokies." She said, "The trouble with the wokies is they want to suck all the joy out of life." And she said, "And you've got to stop them." And I thought, what a great mantra, what a mission statement that is. So I'm now on a mission to cancel culture and to bring the joy back to life, where we can go back to having jokes, laughing at stuff, taking the mickey out of each other, having a lighter view of life without feeling that every word has to be carefully crafted or we immediately see the end of our world. It's crazy.
No, I agree 100%, mate. And I promised I'll mention to the people listening in the other part of what you've done away from the papers, your TV career. Now, Britain's Got Talent. I love Britain's Got Talent. I'm always over in India, so that's always on YouTube watching that. America's Got Talent. That was thanks to your good mate Simon Cowell who got you that opportunity, and obviously you've done a good job over there. The Celebrity Apprentice, Donald Trump. Now, 2008, you won that, didn't you?
Yes, it was the first. What happened was I did America's Got Talent first. That was the first one. Then I did Britain's Got Talent. And then on the back of all this sort of, they were both #1 shows. It was going great. And it was like my new career. And then I got asked to do Celebrity Apprentice in America with Donald Trump. And I'd never met Trump. I met him once, I think. He came to America's Got Talent one day as a guest host or something. Well, he came there. I remember day one he came up to me and he went, I've heard about you, he said. He said, if Rupert thinks you're good enough to edit one of his papers, you must be tough. So I've got my eye out for you. And I laughed. I went, all right. So it was very funny. I was up against people like Gene Simmons from Kiss and Lennox Lewis. I mean, there were some big bruisers in there. And I ended up winning it. And I remember when Trump announced me as the winner, I was up against a 6'7" country singer called Trace Atkins. And I'd absolutely destroyed him in the finale. Where you had to raise money for a charity auction and get the prizes. You raised more than everyone put together. I did. I raised more than all of them put together, and I won. I think about 10 of the 11 challenges or something. And so I destroyed him. So there was no way Trump couldn't let me win, but he was trying to pretend it was still close. And eventually, he said to me, "Piers," he said, I think something like, you're arrogant, you're obnoxious, you're possibly brilliant, I'm not sure, you're a killer, you beat the hell out of everybody, you're my Celebrity Apprentice." So when he won the presidency, I stayed in touch with him over the years, and when he became president, I sent him a note and it said, "Donald," I said, you're arrogant, you're obnoxious, you're possibly brilliant, I don't know, but you kill everyone. And you're the president of the United States with the exact same wording. And he rang me the moment he got it, laughing his head off. He rang me and said, "Is that my champ?" I thought, I don't mind the president of the United States calling me his champ. This could work out really well for me, this. But it was surreal. It was surreal to win it, because 25 million people watched the final of that show. Everywhere I went in America, it was just incredible for the next few weeks. But then to see this guy who was hosting this show become the most powerful man in the world was a crazy, surreal thing to watch. And to be able to call him whenever I wanted at the White House and just get put straight through, and to have him through here at the house in London. No worries. I remember about a week before the election, it was, "Mr. Morgan, this is the White House switchboard. Are you available for the President of the United States?" And I toyed with saying, "Actually, can you get him to call back because the cricket's on?" But
just on your TV career, maybe even your newspaper career as well, we quite often get asked, what's our favourite innings, what's your favourite match? What's the favourite interview you've ever done? Good question.
It's a very good question. I mean, I've had some amazing moments. I mean, I think spending a day with Professor Stephen Hawking, which was the last television interview he gave before he died, up at his study in Cambridge, was quite amazing, because he was a brilliant mind, as we know, but he was trapped in a body which had, deteriorated to the extent it would take him. You had to submit questions before you did the interview days in advance, and he would then program his answers. If you asked any supplementary question during the actual interview, it would take him maybe 30 minutes to do 2 lines on his machine. So it was sort of a very torturous experience, but absolutely fascinating. He was brilliant, an amazing mind, great sense of humor, and just one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Nelson Mandela, I had the pleasure of a one-on-one with him once for about 15 minutes. What an extraordinary presence that guy had. I just remember just coming out feeling, my God, I've just met Mandela. I think everyone that met him had that feeling. I didn't interview the Queen, but I met the Queen several times, and she's the one that the great get for any interview. She'd never given one. And if I could sit with anybody, it would be the Queen. It's, to answer your question, I'd probably say Mandela or Stephen Hawking would be my favourite interviews. But if you ask me the one I'd really love to do, it would be the Queen. I once was at Windsor Castle with her once, and we were looking out over the big gardens out of the window. There was a reception. I said, Your Majesty, can I ask you a question? I said, do you actually like the garden parties that you have to attend? And she looked at me and she said, well, Mr. Morgan, let me put it to you like this. How would you like 12,000 complete strangers trampling on your lawn?
Good point. Good point.
I thought it was a very good answer, to which I said, not very much at all, Mum. And she just raised a regal eyebrow. So she was great fun.
We promised that we'd talk quickly about what happened in the nets. So the background story is that you had a crack at the English bowlers saying that they were rubbish and the Aussie bowlers, and then I jumped on social media and said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then we exchanged numbers and we were sort of behind the scenes, off air, saying, this is getting some good traction. Let's keep it going, because we were just taking the piss purely. Long story short, after about a month or two, I said, all right, tough guy, if you're good enough, come and face me in the nets. And we organised it back then through Channel 9. Buzzard was right behind it and producing the whole thing. And I think it was tea time on day 2 or 3, and you got all the pads on, and 5,000 or 6,000 people, I mean about 6,000 people around the nets come up to watch.
It's like the Colosseum, wasn't it?
Piers Morgan get
like
filled in.
Gladiator about to get eaten by a lion.
Yeah.
And you had the lineup of the Australian bowlers come up to watch. I mean, these guys never leave the dressing room. The English bowlers come up to watch, and all these people up around the Melbourne Cricket Ground nets watching you bat. And I'll give you credit, and I've said it to you in person, I've said it to you on social media. Like, I wouldn't face that, and not many bowlers would. And I was a long way over the front mark as well. It was about 18 yards bowling as quick as I could.
Let's be quite clear.
Exactly.
I would have spanked you. You hadn't bowled such massive no balls.
Well, you bloody charged me. You charged me first up. I'm thinking, who's this bloody?
Well, you know
what's
why?
this bloke
I think
doing?
I told you what happened. So, just to put into context why I charged you first ball. It wasn't an act of kamikaze horror. I'd had dinner with Sir Isaac Vivian Alexander Richards the night before, which was probably a big mistake with hindsight. Because he said to me, "You got to take the attack to him, and he won't be expecting it. Get down the track and go first ball at him, advance to him, and make him know who's boss." Now that's a lot easier to do if you've been Richards.
Exactly.
So on the video of the first ball, by this time the whole place is like a bear pit. You've been hugging Mitchell Johnson, which has sent you into pumped up like a beast, and everyone, and then all the cameras have arrived. It's now being aired on Australian TV Live, British TV Live. It was like completely insane, the whole thing. I thought it would be 100 people and a bit of a laugh, and now it's like literally I could die now. I'm thinking this is it. This could be the last few minutes of my illustrious life. My 3 sons are watching.
Yeah.
The 2 older ones are loving it, willing you to smack me around. The youngest one's just white as a sheet, thinking he's about to lose his father. And I give you the charge first ball, and all I remember is this whirlwind ball bowled off 17 yards. Let's be crystal clear. You were massive no bowling. Otherwise, I would have played the week.
He did that for his whole career, Piers. So it wasn't just
exactly. And I remember Kevin Peterson rang me the night before, and he went, "You should not do this." He said, Brett Lee is a fantastic bloke off a cricket pitch. He said, but on it, he's an absolute animal. And he said, if you do this, after all you've been chirping on Twitter, he's gonna do bad stuff in there. And I went, no, mate. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we saw what went wrong. Was the first one smashed into my wrist. I thought you'd broken my wrist.
So did I.
And you were snorting like a bull. And I thought, you can't show any pain. So just show no pain. Get back up. The second one is where I dive for cover and end up on my backside. This huge cheer. Everyone's now chanting, "Kill him, Binger, kill him, Binger." The third one breaks my rib. And you come down with a big grin on your face. And I was in absolute agony. I thought I'd broken my rib. And I thought, don't show him anything. The fourth one, we had these headsets on. Do you remember? You could hear everything. The fourth one hit the broken rib. And that was now absolute. I was in absolute.
I heard the noise, mate.
Agony.
It was horrendous.
You can pretend you care now, mate. You came running down and went, "Oh, mate, did you hear that one crack?" Which was... So then Warney comes over to you and says, "For God's sake, give him something to hit. This is terrible." And you then york me and smash my stumps. And then the sixth one, just for old time's sake, you then hit me again. So you hit me 4 times and 6 balls. However, my intention was not to actually hit boundaries off you. I just said I would survive an over in the nets against you, against someone who at the time you were playing Big Bash. You're one of the 3 fastest time bowlers in the history of cricket. Our batsmen have showed unbelievable gutlessness out there that tour. and I survived the over, and I kept getting back up like Rocky Balboa. I viewed it very much as Rocky Balboa. Kept getting back up and I was giving it, come on then. Come on,
you kept warming me up.
Which of course you did, gleefully. But then all I remember is I was just in so much pain. And I remember going back into the MCG afterwards, which was packed. It was like it was a world record crowd that day.
Yeah,
it was like 93,000. And I remember going back in, and all the Brits were like, yeah, embarrassing wanker. And all the Aussies stood up and gave me a standing ovation. I didn't buy a drink in Australia for the next 2 weeks. I was walking around getting free beers everywhere again, because the Aussies were like, at last, a bloody pond with some guts around here.
Well, mate, the amount of people...
My guts were spilling out.
The amount of people that even every day in the street that mention that. And just before we went out, you said to me, Binger, if you go soft on me here, I'm going to look like a real wanker. This is going to go against me. You've got to go hard. I've talked it up. I'm going to go out there and do it. And you did it, mate. So, mate, full credit to you, mate. Full credit.
People think, I must have regretted doing it. That was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I've played club cricket for 30 years. I hadn't played much in the previous 10 years, to be fair. But I used to play club cricket. And you'd face, some former county players in the county league and so on in Sussex. And they'd be like bowling, 85 max, right? And it would be rapid, and you'd be like, whoa. And I'd always wonder, what would it be like to face a genuinely one of the fastest bowlers that's ever played the game? And the answer is bloody terrifying. But it was also unbelievably exciting. And it was an incredible thrill. And I also thought afterwards, probably no one's ever going to get this chance again. This won't happen again. It was so amplified, and there was so much controversy about it. And Richard Hadley was writing columns called "You should be arrested for grievous bodily harm" and everything. And actually, I didn't feel any of those things. I felt it was a fantastic bit of theatre. I'd asked for it, you delivered it, and for a club cricketer to actually be able to experience that in the way that I did was phenomenal. So thank you for breaking my ribs and causing me so much pain.
Well, as I said, Piers, that's one of my Ashes highlights. That I was in Binger's ear that fifth ball.
You say pitch it up. For
Christ's sake, don't kill him, because I got my boss behind me, absolutely shitting himself. Said, "Mate, you're going to get done for murder here." But what I loved about
most people thought it was quite fun. But I remember next day meeting Ian Chappell for the first ever time, and only time. And I was actually with Viv Richards, who was furious because he felt you'd bowled no balls, and if he hadn't done, I would have spanked you. I said, Viv, it really isn't as simple as that.
He's got an overinflated opinion you're batting, I think, Viv.
I think he had.
I don't know where he got that from.
You probably see me spank Brian Lara around and just the mass. But or Glenn McGrath. But I remember Chappell walked past. I was with Viv and my kids, and I thought, I've got to say hello to him. I loved Ian Chappell, revered this guy, one of the great Australian captains. I went over, I said, Mr. Chappell. And he went, yeah? I said, I'm Piers Morgan. And he looked at me, didn't shake my hand. He just went, nah, mate, you're a dickhead.
That sounds like Chappell.
And walked off. And that was it. That was my only ever exchange with Ian Chappell. So if Chappelli is listening, you weren't entirely wrong in your assessment. But,
I'll tell you one more enduring memory I have from that night is after you'd been beaten around and we ended up at Warnie's. Warnie has a barbecue every Boxing Day test. I remember we shared a bottle of Jack Daniels and you had ice from one end of your body to the other.
Yeah, like the Michelin Man.
I'm not sure you knew anything was actually broken. You just said, I think my wrist is broken. I think my ribs are broken. But you pushed on.
What was funny, I remember going to trying to get an X-ray the next day, and I went down to some local clinic I'd found online, and I walked in, and there was a doctor and two nurses, and they all burst out laughing and went. And I walked in, and they went, Mr. Morgan, we've been expecting you.
Perfect. Well, mate.
But it was, I still think it was the most courageous innings played by any English batsman out there that winter.
I tell what you have to do too.
I'm proud of myself.
I watched it back today because you've got to see Warnie and Varney. Michael Vaughan was
down
there.
Himself.
You've got to see their reaction as this is happening. I don't know if you've watched it about that.
Well, they're half laughing and they're half like horrified. Kevin Peterson ran me afterwards laughing, saying, "I told you." And then he said, "You'd be pleased to know we all watched it in the England dressing room. Everyone was cheering Brett Lee on."
Well, mate, I reckon I gained a lot of English fans that day.
Oh, you did. But I gained a lot of Australian fans.
You did.
Because to this day, Aussies come up to me on the street and go, that was one of the gutsiest things I've ever watched. Or they say one of the most stupid, which it was both really, but it was an amazing experience. And the extraordinary thing is, despite the fact that you tried to dismember me, we've actually become really good mates.
We have.
And to be fair to you, you did take me and my younger brother out for a fantastic dinner. What was that restaurant we went to? It was a brilliant place.
Bathers in Balmoral.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we went with your brother.
Yeah,
and
Esley.
you bought some very, very expensive Penfolds, which if I'd known you were going to be that generous, I'd have let you break a few more ribs.
Well, mate, thank you so much. You've obviously done so many other things, which I haven't even got time to go through. Like, time's gotten away, but your TV career. One thing I did enjoy is The Killer Women with Piers Morgan. That's a really good segment and, a wonderful show. Anything else in the pipeline, just quickly, before we go?
Yes, I've actually gone back to work for Rupert Murdoch, News Corporation and Fox globally. And as part of that deal, I'm doing a new daily show, which will be coming in the spring in a few months. And it will be airing on Sky News Australia. Aussies will be able to tune in and they'll be able to see me single-handedly take on the woke brigade and cancel culture. And if that doesn't get you all watching, nothing will.
Well,
I'll be watching.
Looking forward to it, mate. And once again, thank you so much. You're a terrific guy, even better in person, and looking to catch up for another glass of wine when we can, mate. So, keep safe and look after yourself.
Thanks, Jess. I love your podcast. A pleasure to come on. If I could have chosen my timing, it would definitely not have been 2 days after we get the worst drubbing in Ashes history. But despite that, well played, Australia, and well done on the podcast, and good to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of the Brett Lee Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to get involved, send an email to the Brett Lee Podcast at news.com.au, or you can get involved, as we heard from Dan this afternoon, in our WhatsApp group. So, buzz it. Piers Morgan, he has an amazing career in the media, and it sounds like there's more to come.
We could have got on for 2 hours
Yep.
easily. We didn't get into half the things we wanted to talk to him about. He was the fourth most Googled celebrity in the UK last year, behind Christian Eriksen, who was an unfortunate footballer who died of a heart attack. Matt Hancock, a British politician who got caught with his duds down. Emma Raducanu, who won the US Open, the young tennis player. And Ronaldo was number 7. So that gives
Piers
you some
Morgan
sort of,
was ahead of Ronaldo.
Yeah, Travis Scott, the rapper, was behind him as well. Alex Baldwin had the issue on the movie set with that tragic accident. So just doesn't come any bigger.
He's a good fella, isn't he, Piers Morgan?
And good fun. Loves his cricket.
Yep.
And as you and I know, is a great character.
Well, he can keep his ribs up, and what do we do?
Do you reckon he'd take you on again?
Is that a
challenge?
I don't
Let's
know.
throw it out there for him.
Piers, if you're ready, I'm ready.
They should have healed by now. He's got plenty of ribs.
Exactly. All right, as we say, Buzz,
Keep your chins up.
keep your ribs up.